And one thing I think I'm really thinking about over the past couple of years is the assessment piece to the classroom. I think I've really thought about, shifting instruction and all the things that I can do that way. But as of late, and it's changing now, but like it's been a lot of, okay, but then I have to pop a grade in the grade book for report cards. And it just becomes like
Hmm.
something I've stamped on your work, And like,
Yeah.
no, there's so much more. They need to be able to have ownership over their, like, where am I in my learning? And so for
Right.
me, like, how do I keep that going? So really focusing on self-assessment so that they can talk
Mhm.
about where they are in their learning. Welcome to Pass the Baton, empowering students in music education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to a new season of the Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover. We're so glad that you're joining us for this new season, season 6. Can you believe it, Kathryn?
Ooh, it's wild.
I
Episode
know.
115. That's crazy.
Yes, very exciting. So we're glad that you're joining us here at this new season and a back to school session. We hope that you had a good summer. I hope it was relaxing. You had a chance to just take a deep breath, maybe do something enjoyable with friends and family. We recognize this is early August, so teachers are in different places. I know I have some teacher friends in Arizona who are already back in the classroom, and then I have other teacher friends who are like, don't talk to me about back to school. We don't go till September. So I know that everybody's in a different spot. Kathryn, what about for you? When do you guys start back?
Yeah, I am starting back in about 7 days. So August 17th is my
Ooh,
start date. So,
okay. Yep.
yeah.
That's when
So,
classes start for us as well, August 17th. Oh my
yeah.
goodness. It's kind of crazy to think about that's coming so quickly. But such is how the calendar works. So summer. I think it was really fun thinking we had those best of episodes, which I don't
Mhm.
know. I love re-listening to some of those conversations. It just makes me smile thinking about the wonderful guests that we've had on. Did you do anything fun this summer?
This summer was fun with my kids because it was one has graduated and is getting the first adult apartment and the first adult
Oh,
job,
yeah,
and so that was kind of fun helping them set up and think about adult things. And
yeah.
then one is starting her new adventure at Montana State University. So we got to go to Bozeman,
Wow.
Montana, and do registration and orientation, that kind of thing, and get started. So, and then we're headed back soon to drop off and move in. So,
Wow. That's exciting.
yeah.
That's really,
Yeah.
really exciting.
Yeah. And what
Yeah.
about you, Teresa?
Yeah, I had a good summer. Nothing quite as big as that. Um, I mostly just kind of enjoyed being able to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. It was,
Yeah.
I did not have a cross country move this summer like I had last summer. I was not trying to write a dissertation this summer. I got to just enjoy, I was teaching some online classes. I was reading the things that I wanted to read, spending time with friends. I've got one more real quick little beach adventure coming up, which I'm excited about. And yeah, but it's been a nice summer. I tried to mix my reading so that I had some just fun, poolside type reads and some,
Yeah.
you know, more intellectual things. So it was a nice mix of just kind of getting a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I think it's nice to have those. I don't know if you call them slower summers, but just kind of where you just are present but
Yeah.
relaxed. And yeah, those are nice
Yes.
summers.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really good. And like I said, now we're back here for season 6. I guess we should say we have been recording some podcast interviews, which has been really fun. I think all of our listeners are in for a real treat with this season with some of the people we have
Hmm.
coming to talk. I think that's the other thing that always impresses me and just excites me about this podcast is that we 115 episodes in are not running out of people to talk to.
Yeah.
There's,
So many new
everywhere we
perspectives.
turn.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think that's been really neat. Just meeting new people and hearing new things. And we'll say to you, the listeners, we we're always like looking for new people as well. So if you would like to come and share your story on the podcast, like please reach out. Or if you've, have a coworker or a friend that you work with, you think needs to share their story, reach out. Um, we're going to probably take a little break from recording when the school year starts because we
Yeah.
batched a bunch in the summer, but it's always nice to have people that we can reach out to. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going through your back to school prep and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
um we were thinking about this particular episode and back to school. We were trying to decide what we wanted to talk about and how we wanted to approach this new season. And, a lot of conversations about back to school are very practical. We're thinking about
Mm-hmm.
like the first day activities, how they're going to you set the classroom up, what your procedures and routines are going to be, things like that. And, of course, we're all thinking about those things and they're all important. But really, what we want to talk about today is the things that are a bit more invisible, right? Some of those decisions that we make and some of those mindsets that we start the year with.
Yeah. And I think it's super important to have those in place so you don't get so lost in the what, because we get into those meetings, for me in 7 days, I get those meetings. I think I'm really prepared. And then all of a sudden you get thrown at all the things that you need to do. And it's so easy to get stuck in the what's and forget,
Yeah,
the big picture. And if you have that, we have that time beforehand, or just to make sure you make time to think about those big ideas, it'll help lead you through the rest of the year.
exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that idea of starting the year with those intentional mindsets, it'll just pave the path for the rest of your year. So that's kind of our plan for today is we're going to talk through some questions that we've been really thinking about and asking ourselves as the school year approaches, that we hope that you can always also use in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to all of that, we're going to take a quick break. We want you to hear from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back with those 5 questions.
Do you love being a music teacher but feel like the job is slowly wearing you down? Does it feel like you're always behind, constantly thinking about school, and too exhausted at the end of the day to be fully present with the people you love? I'm Leslie Moffat, host of the Band Director Bootcamp podcast, and I have been there. That's why I wrote, I love my job, but it's killing me. If you're overwhelmed and wondering how to make this career sustainable without losing your passion, this book is for you. I'd love to send you a free copy. Visit empowerededucator.com/free book and take the first step toward amplifying your impact and not your workload. That's the letter M, the word powerededucator.com/free book.
Okay, so this first question we're going to look at is, what are you going to control, right? What am I going to be thinking about that is mine to worry about throughout the school year? And it's really, sometimes we think of this in terms of like classroom management, trying to control behaviors or conversations or, outcomes or things like that. But maybe the answer is, instead of controlling those things, but controlling the environment, right? Controlling how we prepare for our classes and for our day, how we are clear and consistent in what we do, things like that. Because if we can put control there, I think it's going to make everything else flow a little bit easier. So, you want to ask yourself, what kind of things am I trying to spend energy controlling that I really don't need to, or really I even can't, right? There's always those things, right? The things that I'm trying to control that I actually have no control over. And wondering like what happens when I do let go of that control. And if so, how it's going to impact the students and their learning.
Yeah.
So what
I had
control is a big thing to think about.
I mean, we all, right? That's a big thing for us as teachers. But also, I
Mm-hmm.
had a principal who would say, focus on what you want to see. If you put all of your effort on what you want from kids and what you want to see, that's you're going to get back, right? Like if I focus on the negative, I'm only seeing that they're all this negative. But if I focus on the positive, but I focus on the things that I can have some say into,
Mm-hmm.
you will, you will get, you'll start to put all your expectations into what you want to see and get kids there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's important to, like, what can I do in my environment, in my preparation to kind of, um, still set my expectations and things. So I know one thing for me is like standing at the door and saying hello to kids and building those relationships right off the bat, having a welcoming environment, right? And that's a must, even when it's like, oh, I got to set up this, and this. Whatever. I'm going to stop at the door and I'm going to make sure I welcome kids. Um, and then I think the environment is important too to prep for, right? Because
Yeah.
like if there are things that are not working in the flow for students and we're constantly students are having trouble with playing instruments while they're in line, move the instruments, or make it so it's a flow
Right.
where, right? Like if it becomes that many students are doing that, I can change that environment so that becomes not an issue anymore. Right. So I can focus that way. And then another thing I tend to do is we use champs in our curriculum, which is just a part of a larger stoic framework that helps teachers kind of be this idea of being proactive, helping kids understand expectations, teaching kids expectations, and helping them learn, the appropriate ways to how the classroom is going to run. So using this champs, which is just the conversation, how do I get help? Conversation level, how do I get help? What is the activity? What does movement look like for this activity? What does participation look like? And then even more importantly, like success. We will be successful. We will be successful when these things happen. And then even this year, I've been thinking about like, or we've been the end of last year reflecting on, were we successful? Were we not? What do we need to do for next time? Right. And kind of having the kids help me with that expectations. I feel like those are things that I can really focus on to help generate a classroom environment that is positive, but also um, something that I have control over, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the environment's such a big one that was it what immediately was coming to mind for me as well is like, what is this environment? And obviously the environment can be like the physical space and it can also be
Mm-hmm.
like how we interact with each other. But I was thinking a lot about the physical space. It's fascinating to me in the college world because I don't have a classroom that's mine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I go into a classroom and I teach, and then I leave and I go into another classroom. And, so there's all of these shared spaces. And as a result, the spaces get used in different ways for different purposes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what might be a rehearsal room at one point later on becomes more of a classroom, which then becomes things like that. So I've been thinking a lot about like the physical space. And I think last year I was a little bit more okay with just kind of like walking in and, okay, here's what the space looks like today. But this coming year, I want to be a lot more intentional about that, which means like getting there before the students, setting up the chairs a specific way, making sure that things are, kind of the way that I want them. For example, I teach a freshman level class at 8 a.m., which is that's a thing. But it's also very, very discussion based. So I want to this year be really intentional with how I set the room to facilitate those discussions, to encourage all of the students to participate in the discussion and to be
Mm-hmm.
active, because if I'm not intentional about that, it's very easy for someone to just kind of hide in the back, right? And not
Mm-hmm.
participate or things like that. So that's something that I really want to have more control on this year because I obviously can't control how they participate, if they show up, any of those things. But if I can get an environment that's going to be really conducive to those
Mm-hmm.
discussions, maybe it's more likely that we're going to be successful that way, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing that I've been thinking about too when it comes to control is just being really, really clear with my expectations. I
Yes.
think sometimes when I get in my head about like students need choice and they need creativity and that I default to not giving a lot of information about what I want, but then I'm not always happy with what I get, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of my other goals for the year, as far as like control things goes, is being really clear about my expectations while still leaving room for that student voice and choice, creativity, and things like that. And I think that's very possible,
Mm-hmm.
but it just takes intention.
Mm-hmm.
So like those are kind of the things that I'm thinking about is just how can I have that control while still leaving room for the students to be growing into their own people, right? But the fact is, we can't control everything.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to have some space for it to become our classroom, not my classroom, right?
Right, right. And I think that's where it kind of transitions to question number two, right? So if there's some things that we can let go of that control so that someone else can take ownership, that's the next step. So question number two really comes down to, what are the students going to own, right? We talked about the things that we want to control, but now we can think about what the students are going to own, because we don't want to control everything. That would just go against basically everything Pass the Baton stands for. But we can think about, the student ownership, and that can come from anything between musical decisions, rehearsal strategies, classroom jobs, being more proactive in reflecting and assessing themselves. That's something that I've been really, really trying to think about. Having more ownership and creativity and leadership, all of that things. So just kind of thinking about, where do the students get to make decisions, like real decisions, not just choosing between A and B. And you can also take that to think about, like, what decisions am I making as the teacher simply because, like, well, that's what teachers do. I make those decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, what can I hand over? And one thing I think I'm really thinking about over the past couple of years is the assessment piece to the classroom. I think I've really thought about, shifting instruction and all the things that I can do that way. But as of late, and it's changing now, but like it's been a lot of, okay, but then I have to pop a grade in the grade book for report cards. And it just becomes like something I've stamped on your work, and like, no, there's so much more. They need to be able to have ownership over their, like, where am I in my learning? And so for me, like, how do I keep that going? So really focusing on self-assessments so that they can talk about where they are in their learning. And even also just varying how I do assessments so that, one way, like their singing voices, and with these talking about little singing voices, could be I sing with a puppet, could be I do a recording in Seesaw, could be I'm singing in a singing game and I'm singing a solo. All three things are getting my singing voice going and I'm singing out loud to other people. But for different 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, that matters how I do that. Right. I might feel a little more privacy with the Seesaw in the corner behind a recording studio, or the puppet just makes it feel like the puppet's making the sound. But again, like everybody has, we come as humans. It's not like I can just say everyone's going to be able to use their singing voice comfortably this way. So varying it for different learners, I think it's, I'm trying to make sure that I have multiple ways that I do that. So assessment, I think, is a big focus for me. Like, how am I making sure? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, something that you said in there just like really like light bulb moment, right? It's not only you saying, I hereby assess you, but it's also the student knowing where they are.
Yes.
Right? I think that piece of it is so valuable. And I don't even mean like a student being able to like grade themselves, but just being able to internalize, like, this is where I am. And that's not going to be every single class that you do that kind of assessment.
No.
But if that's happening periodically throughout the school year, it's so much more valuable than if you were just like doing assessment to them. Right.
Correct.
So I think,
Yeah. So that's something to really, I'm kind of fostering some more, just thinking more in depth. How can I really add to that as I go over the years? Because it's, it's important for me. I want them to be able, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, up to 5th graders, like, tell me what they know and, and they're learning what they need next. But then also I think an important part is the facilitating lessons so that kids are like, they're doing the problem solving and the discovering and the exploration, right? Like they're coming and the reflection of the learning. So sometimes I think like, is my lesson very much like I do this. Where's the conversation from the kids? Where's the discovering from the kids? you know.
Yeah.
So that's something else that I'm like, because it's easy to flip back into the this is a blah blah blah, and then like just tell
Mhm.
them all about something instead of making it more engaging by asking questions and finding their own answers. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is another one again that I'm thinking of about too. And how are they going to take ownership? And it's funny because I just was saying how like, oh, the freshmen, I'm going to control the classroom setup and I'm going to do this and this. But then like the same day I'll have a class of juniors, right? So they've a bit older, more mature. And that particular group, I am basically sprinting one from one classroom to the next classroom and like to get it. No, juniors, you are in charge of the setup. and
Well,
but
and
and that's going to be something at the beginning of the year like, okay, you're going to be in charge of getting this ready. What do we need? What's going to be the best way to facilitate what we're doing in this class for everyone to be successful? Like they can
mhm.
take control of that because a little bit older, a little bit wiser, all
Not
of
8
those things.
a.m.
Not 8 a.m., right?
Yep.
but
Which all
that's
those things make a
something
difference.
that they can
Yeah.
start to take ownership of.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about, grading too, like us grading and assessment, like you were saying, that is something that they need to be aware of. It's not that I'm giving them a grade. How
Mm-hmm.
are you how are you showing your understanding? How are you demonstrating your mastery of these skills and these topics?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to do a bit more of like group collaborative work. Like it doesn't need to be me just delivering this information. They can do it. They can work together. I'm still there facilitating. And it's funny because as I was, we're preparing for this episode, we, no surprise to the audience, had these questions already lined up. We, we knew what we were doing. But as I'm preparing, I'm like, this is really similar to middle school band, right? Because there's so many similarities. Like right now, I'm talking about college students who are, in all intents and purposes, grown adults, right? But it's also
Mm-hmm.
very similar to thinking about the middle school kids, right? They were able to help me set up the classroom.
Sure.
They maybe the grading and assessment thing they still needed some more work on, but I wanted them to be aware of where they are and self-reflecting and able to say like, I can't quite play my B flat scale up to speed yet because of XYZ. Like they needed to have that same awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And the group work was just as valuable, right? It was a
Mm-hmm.
different level of what they were working on, but there's no reason I couldn't say, okay, flutes, you're going to go over here in this corner and you're going to work on this. What strategies do you think you should do? Oh, yep, I think that's a great idea. Slow it down. Make sure everybody knows the fingerings. So I'm just, it's interesting for me to reflect on the fact that I'm talking about the things, today in my world as college teacher, but it's very similar to what it would look like if I were in a middle school band room, a high school band room, all of
Mm-hmm.
that,
I mean, it does, right? Like my self-assessment with 6-year-olds is then like the same kind of thing of the ungrading you're talking about, but
Yeah.
obviously with young adults you can then have them do a little bit more or dig a little bit more into that, but
Hmm.
still it's the same thing. Like the learner should be a part of the assessment piece.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Because we
own
want
what they
that
know
owner.
and don't know. What do I need next? Where am I? Oh, I'm not there
Right.
yet. Okay. Mrs. Finch
Hmm.
said we're going to keep going and practicing. That's all I.
Yeah. We talk about scaffolding all the time, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right. And ideally, as you're starting this process with the 6-year-olds, when they get to fifth grade, they're a little bit more comfortable. And then they get to
Mm-hmm.
middle school a little bit more. Right. So we're helping them build these skills and these competencies that are going to be with them forever. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think we don't ever want to say like, oh, my students are too young or too old for XYZ. It's just figuring out where do they fit on that spectrum and where are they. And it might not have anything to do with their age. It might just have to do with their experiences
Mm-hmm.
in learning environments. But yeah, it fits. It fits everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's keep thinking through some of these, right? So we're talking about decisions, right? What kind of things students are going to own, how they're going to take that ownership. We also have to think about how we're creating an environment that makes students feel like they can do those things, that they can take that ownership. And really that comes down to trust, right? What
Mm-hmm.
kind of routines are we setting in place in the classroom that communicates that we trust our students, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to say those words, but like how are we actually showing it? What are we doing, right? And that's going to be all kinds of different routines, like how the students enter the room and do their warm-ups, kind of how they work together in the classroom, how you handle reflection, just all the little details that go into the classroom. What do we do that's going to help communicate that, we trust these students, as opposed to like, we assume you're going to do it wrong, therefore I must
Right.
I must intervene right away. So what do you think about that? That's a
I
trust is
yeah,
an
I
interesting.
yeah, I think my mind shift or my mind frame of it is not Mrs. Finch's classroom, but it is our space is just
Mm-hmm.
naturally where I go. But how do you get to our, right? How do they feel that it is an
Mm-hmm.
our space? And I think something I talked about earlier with the champs idea, it would be one thing if Mrs. Finch defines all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. And when we begin school and with expectations, I probably will do some of them at the beginning, but quickly after it becomes, all right, we're going to go do that small group work. What's the conversation level going to be? Who thinks what, what do we think it should be? And as a class, we create those different steps. So it becomes us deciding, what that is. Another example that I've done, like when we get ready for a winter sing, I will do that kind of what what is Mrs. So and so's class going to look like on the risers for our winter sing? What does that look like? And every class is the same ish, but different. And I make sure I use their verbiage and I put it on a Google slide. So every time that class comes in, I just flip to that
Yeah.
slide. But again, it's like we're coming up with the expectations for our winter sing, what we think we should look like. And again, they're all, we're really focused. We're going to be looking straight forward, like all those things. But
Yeah.
it's the fact that it came from them. And sometimes there's little differences, because every class is different. But yeah, like crafting things together is such, I think, an important thing to
Mm-hmm.
share that, like, yes, it's not my classroom, it's ours, and we're going to do this together
Yeah. Well,
and
and I
reflect
think a lot
together,
of,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that you mentioned, they talked about defining success and not
Mm-hmm.
here are all the ways you might fail. And I
Correct.
think that's a big difference, right? It's easy for me to say, like, these are all the things that are going to define what success looks like. And I'm not thinking about all the different ways you could fail because I'm not worried about you failing. I want to help you be successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to say, like, here are all the penalties for the things that you might do wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That means that I anticipate you will be wrong. And I
Mm-hmm.
think just framing it in that positive way, like you do, that makes a big difference in the communication.
Yeah, I do think the success helps give the why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have to be a level 2 or like a level 0 in our conversation, a quiet voice? Why? Well, we've talked as a group, it needs to be that way so we all can focus and think and do this test or whatever we're doing, right? Like there's the success is like, it was a quiet environment. So everybody was able to do their thinking or whatever. Again, it gives the why to kids. And then they're like, oh, all right, that makes sense, to
Mm-hmm.
cut. Yeah. So it's not just Mrs. Finch's rule. We just have to be, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. I think that, and it needs to be a trusting environment. It needs to be a caring and supportive environment. Kids have to feel safe. Like all of those things we know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah, I think another one too is, of course, just because we said this is, and as a group, we came up with the champs doesn't mean we're gonna follow it every single time. Right, like
Right.
there's gonna be a
Right.
fire drill. It's gonna be a wild day of full moon or something, and everybody's had cupcakes before they came to music class or whatever. Like there's going to be times that we're going to struggle with the goal or with the
Mm-hmm.
expectations. But that's when we also come back as a group and say, okay, let's meet again. How are things going? We are not a level 0. We, okay, what
Mm-hmm.
can we do to help everybody, or what do we need in place?
Mm-hmm.
And again, just having those discussions, okay, so today we didn't meet that success. That's okay. We're human. What are we going to do next
Yeah.
time when they come into the classroom next time? Okay, remember we said this is how we want, right? But it's like not Mrs. Finch doing something to them. It's just all right. As life happens, it didn't go the way we wanted. What are we going to change? What are we going to do?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot to think about, but it's important as well.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, if we kind of take that to the flip side though, sometimes it's easy to get into habits or routines that instead of communicating trust, they just communicate a desire for compliance.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's an easy one. I think there's areas that we all do this, right? Where we're just looking for students to be obedient and provide the right answer. Environments where we're the ones who fix all of the rehearsal
Mm-hmm.
errors, and kids have to ask permission for everything. So those things, while very common in education, because that's kind of what our educational system was built on, the communication there is that no, you will be here to comply, as opposed to you are here, and I trust you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's something you have to think about. Like, if a student's successful in our class, is it because they were really thinking musically, or because they were good at following directions?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that's been on my mind all summer as I think about like the grading thing, right? Is like, what are these grades actually showing? That the student has figured out how to play the game of college, or that the student has
Right.
really learned and grew and developed as a musician and as a future teacher? So
Yeah.
it's one of those things that like almost makes you feel a little bit icky inside, but at the same time I think it's the most important thing to think about is is our communication, and yeah, how much are we thinking about compliance, and where is it getting us in
Yeah.
trouble?
And I think as I was talking in the last about our last question, like some
Mm-hmm.
people might say, oh my gosh, that takes so much time. And it can and it can't. It just depends,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's not like every activity we do, we are as a group deciding. Sometimes it's just to save time there, and it's a routine we've done. So we just pop it
Yeah,
back up and go, right? But
absolutely.
I do think if we don't take time when it's appropriate to do that with kids, it's really easy to slide back into the I just expect the compliance. And that's, Mrs.
Yeah.
Finch says, and I do the talking and it should be silent. And so it's like this balance of these two questions almost, right?
Yeah.
There's
Right.
gonna be times where it's like, we gotta we got 15 minutes, guys. Here's what
Yeah.
we're gonna do.
You
You
need to
know,
follow directions.
yes, it needs to be
Yes.
quiet.
Yes.
Like, yes. But like it's this balance back and forth, right? It's not just one, and it's definitely not just compliance all the time, right? There's this give and take, and there's appropriate times for students to help. Again, for winter sing, I can tell them to look forward and look at me and all these things. But if they come up with those things and they want to
Right.
hold themselves to that, there's just much more meaning to it for them than
Right.
Mrs. Finch said, And then now she's mad at me again because we're not or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah. The compliance one, like I said, it's been on my mind quite a bit. We think about like who's talking, right? 8 a.m. Oftentimes it's me talking because I'm like, come on, guys. But
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
hoping that, things like being intentional about the classroom setup and like just a lot of different intentionality on my part can help, show that like, no, it's not me telling you what to think. I want to hear what you have to think. Just being really intentional about that. And, I feel like a broken record, and I apologize, but my brain is still so much on grades. Like, what
mm-hmm.
are these ideas of grades? What are they communicating? And the one class that I've been thinking about a lot, how I'm going to do the grading. I really want to change the mindset to like, well, you need to complete this number of assignments, and if you complete that number of assignments, you get an A. Like, I don't want the A to be the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to like reframe it to say like, if you complete this many assignments, you're going to demonstrate that you have a comprehensive mastery of this content, right? So it's not that you're just trying to complete those things to get an A. You're trying to complete them because you really want to master the content. And I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
small shift, but the A saying do these things to get this grade to me is a very compliant way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. It is,
But if
yeah.
we can shift it to like, no, if you want to learn, these are the things you need to do to get there. So it's a very, very subtle shift, and ask me in a couple months how it's going. but I like just little things like that. I'm thinking about. And then the other one that just comes to mind with compliance is this is hard. We're in music school. A lot of times the goal is to do it right. And there's one
Mm-hmm.
version of right. right? Like we could probably all think back to undergrad when it was just like the goal is to play the piece the way my teacher wants me to play the piece.
Yeah.
So helping the students get out of that mindset a little bit, especially in their music ed classes, to be creative and silly and fun and like again, when you're in your private lesson and you're trying to learn very specific things like towards specific musical skills, yes, there is a right and a wrong. But
Hmm.
let's remember that music has more to it than just that. Like there is room for creativity and there is room for anyone to be making musical decisions. Doesn't just have to be me, the teacher. So
Yeah.
for me, trying to model that as much as possible, that it's not just about the perfection and the right and wrong, but it's
Hmm.
about the expression and the creativity and the joy that can come from this thing that we do.
Yeah. And you're making me think too in my room because so I guess champs is one way that we create expectations for our activities, but also because we're always in that room and that room is meant for general music all day, all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Setting up things like a student center where they can go for Kleenex or extra
Yeah.
supplies and it's you get up and you go, you take care of yourself. You're not,
Right.
can I go get a Kleenex? You just go get a Kleenex, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that I think helps with the compliance piece of it's a message I feel like they get of this. I want you to take care of yourself,
Yeah.
and, if, because I have young ones, if something is being abused, like there are times in first grade that Band-Aids are really popular, really popular.
Yes.
So then we just have a discussion, about the use of them so that we're not just putting them over our arms, just put them over our arms, but we're using them for a
Yeah.
purpose so that, when you have a need, it's there.
Yeah.
But that I think is a way just to kind of also show that Mrs. Finch is in charge of everything. Also, just labeling things on the walls where the instruments are. And when it's time to take things away, because I don't need it for the next class, could I have friends that can help me? They know where to put things. It's
Yeah.
not Mrs. Finch may only touch the instruments. But again, and those are little things and they're not necessarily instruction, but I think they give messages that
Right. Well, that goes back to that communication of trust. When you have the Kleenex and the Band-Aids there, you're saying, I trust you to do what you need for your body.
mm-hmm.
Whereas, right, if it was, I had to raise my hand every time I needed to blow my nose during allergy season, like
Right.
you're just looking for compliance there. But,
Yeah,
you know, and yes, I think students of any age will sometimes need reminders and
sure.
help with those things. But
Yeah. And my exception is the bathroom because I tell them I need to know where you are at every moment. We,
of
we are right
course,
now are in construction. So it's really even more hypersensitive to like a little friend can't just leave,
absolutely.
can't just go out a
Yeah.
door.
And that's
And
a
so
safety thing,
and
right?
I think they understand that, right? Like, that because I give them that reason. Like I have to know, I want to know where you are at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
we have to, I think that's where it comes back to like, we're not saying that compliance is a bad thing all the time. It just can't be your
no.
only thing,
Yeah, right.
right? And when
And
we're
what
talking about student safety,
right.
compliance is the only way.
Yep.
It's the same thing with
Yep.
the fire drill. It's the same thing with, any.
Yeah. But again, in the question, like what habits might accidentally be making a message of compliance?
Right.
And if you're like, oh, I don't mean that, how can we just again with all these questions kind of prep ourselves for our whole school year of making an intentional thought
Yeah,
to or being intentional about those things.
of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of being intentional,
Yep.
traditions. Traditions are part of every music program, right?
Yes.
And I think we can all agree that some of them are really valuable and really important to a school community and all of those things. And some of them maybe don't need to be around, right? So
Mm-hmm.
having that moment and taking some time to really examine your traditions and think about which ones are worth keeping and which ones can we either do away with or just adjust to better fit with everything else that we're doing in the classroom, right?
Yep.
Um, And traditions can come down to big things like community events, or it might be something small, like a specific little ritual you do before a concert, or
Mm-hmm.
a routine that you do at the beginning of class, things like that. So we really have to take the time to ask ourselves, is this tradition still part of our, what we do because it serves the students, or is it because we've always done it?
Right.
And that's, it's a hard way to, it can be challenging, especially if it's something that we've always done. But I think that
Mm-hmm.
that question is really important. The
Even if
tradition
it's
should
just,
be, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, even if it's just raising the concern, speaking with your admin, and then like it's something that's on your radar so that,
Absolutely.
something like next year we're moving into a new building. That's a new beginning for us. That might be a
Hmm.
time to switch something or not, but like, that might be an opening for that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So no, first it is just knowing, rethinking those traditions and making sure they're on your radar, right? And then
Yeah.
and maybe you don't make an action just then, there and then, but finding opportunities for that. I know too, like, when I've said this before, but kindergarten used to be in a winter sing, and we were like, it just
Hmm.
doesn't serve the kids anymore. They still have a sing, it's just now in the classroom. So it's kind of
Right.
not like we gotta wait changing something completely, but just making a shift so it's kind of fits the kids' needs a little bit better. So it's
Yeah.
not even just necessarily like doing away with something. It could just be changing it slightly.
Right. Well, and I've thought about that with concerts a lot because obviously concerts are such a big thing and they're an important way to allow students to showcase what they've learned and to invite the community and all of those things. So I would never suggest someone get rid of a concert, but maybe we think about what happens during it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an opportunity for small ensembles? Is there an opportunity to showcase different elements of the program aside from just the traditional large ensembles that we've done? So when you think through again, like those things for a concert, what's the important piece of that we want to keep, and are there little elements of it that maybe we should adjust to better suit the
Mm-hmm.
needs of students, right? I know some communities have even just thought about that as in terms of what happens at a concert. For example, a school that I used to teach at for a long time had always had a Christmas concert. Well, we started to realize that that didn't fit the demographic of the community anymore. So they still have an event in December, but what's performed at that event is slightly different to better match the students who are there, right? So we're
Mm-hmm.
not we're not saying, oh, just cut the whole thing. It's just how can we better meet the needs of the students who are part of our programs. And I think that's just a good way to think about it.
Mm-hmm. One for us too is just having a program in the middle of the day. One was in the middle of the day, one was at night. And
Hmm.
now kind of discovering that's not really working for our parents as well. Like there's an equity issue. So
Yeah.
now they're both at night, and it's just kind of rethinking a little portion of that program
Hmm.
and what serves our community better.
Yeah. But that was you looking at your community to figure out
Mm-hmm.
how, right? And that's not necessarily going to be the case for everybody's community, but that was
Mm-hmm.
the important thing, that you looked at your community and your students.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the key with all of these traditions is what's going to be best for the people, who we serve.
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah, good way to think about it. Okay, so here's what we're going to encourage you to do. It's not the same as a New Year's resolution per se, but we want you to go into this school year with some intentions. So we want you to think about these three questions or these three sentences and how you would complete them. The first, I want students leaving my room believing. This year I will stop doing, and my students will own blank. Okay. So just think about how you would finish those three sentences. Make those sentences your intentions moving forward for this school year.
Yeah. I feel like for me, one that really resonates that you said right now is that I want my students leaving my room believing, and I wanted to say, I want all my students
I
leaving
like
my
that.
room believing they are heard and seen, and they feel like, and they know they're musical beings. That's super, super important to me.
Yeah. And I think if you take that and just think about that every week as you're planning and as you're
Mm-hmm.
that's a great way to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for me, I've mentioned 100 things I'm thinking about, but again,
Yeah.
just thinking about what I want my students to own, I really want them just to own their learning. I don't want them to
Mm-hmm.
think about college and my class is just like one more set of boxes to check. I want them to feel like they have ownership over learning and their musicianship and, learning to be a teacher, all of those things. And I think just figuring out how I can help them get in that kind of mindset that will really set them up for success, not only when they're in my classes, but just as they move through with life, right? Because if you're just
Yeah.
checking boxes, what are you getting out of that?
I know. And I guess I think, gosh, that's so powerful because they're becoming music teachers in your
Yeah.
room, right? Like they're learning to become
Yeah.
music teachers. And like that to me is like, this is the kind of, if they can start to learn what kind of music teacher are you, what do you find,
Mhm.
how do you learn, what do you find important, or what's important for your classroom? Like those are all amazing things to walk into a classroom with.
Yeah,
So that,
absolutely.
yeah.
So again, those 3 sentences. I want students, or I want all students leaving
Yeah.
my room believing. This year I will stop and my students will own. So think about, what are the answers to those for you yourself, and how are you going to use that, moving through your own school year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a lot of good things to think about, right? And that's what we need to do at this time of year. So before we go, a couple updates, Pass the Baton related. Obviously, we said we've got a great season ahead. You're going to love these upcoming guests. We also wanted to mention, Coffee Club. We talk about that often. Thank you for people who are already members. And we love the feedback that we get from you. So keep that coming. That's a great thing. For Coffee Club, if you're new to Coffee Club, basically we release a special podcast episode every 2 weeks, like we call it a deeper dive, where we dive into something from an episode. So you can get access to that. There's also a Reflect and Act PDF that comes out along with it, just kind of giving you some time and space to go deeper and think about things from that week and some action steps you can take. We also have a whole bunch of other resources in the Coffee Club that are available for members: lesson plans, projects, activities. I can't even think of all the things because there's so many
It's a
different,
lot.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And not to mention, you have access to all of the all previous resources too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is in there and stays in there.
Yeah.
So as a special kind of back to school, we're going to discount that Coffee Club membership if you want to sign up for a year. Instead of the typical $50 for the month of August, you can sign up for only $40. So if you are interested in a year membership, you can head over to the Coffee Club. The link is going to be in the show notes. You can grab that for only $40. September 1st goes back up to $50. So if that's something you
Get it
think you
in
might be
August.
interested, yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Get it now. That's when you want to be in there.
Yeah.
One other thing we're mentioning, I know it's a lot at the end of the episode. We also have a back to school challenge that's going to be out. We'll leave it open for the month of August. Basically, just 5 things to get you thinking about for the beginning of the school year. You sign up for the back to school challenge, you'll receive 1 email per week for 5 weeks. Just again with a kind of a question for you to ponder on, some kind of action steps, just to get yourself in a good place for the school year, thinking about student ownership, how we can be kind of setting the stage for these students to feel empowered. The back to school challenge is completely free. You can sign up for that. We'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. And, it's just something fun that we thought would be nice. And the emails are pretty short. Like you should be able to read it in 5 minutes because
Yeah.
nobody has time for more.
Right. And I think the other thing is great about it is like it's more of the what, but it's tied to everything we've been talking about, in that the what isn't going to take you down a road that's not about empowering our students.
Of course.
Right. It's going to make sure that they're creating and they're asking questions and they have voice and
Right.
choice and all those
Right.
things.
Right. That's a good point. Thinking about that, the what, right? This episode was very much like why,
Uh-huh.
which is obviously one of the most important things, but sometimes having those little what do I do is going to be helpful as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for being back with us for this new season, season 6. We're so glad that you're here. you have to think about this year. It's not going to just be shaped by what you teach, right? It's also shaped by those decisions that you're making before the students even walk in the door. So we hope that you can start the year intentionally, start it with these good ideas, and then I think great things will happen. Thanks for joining us. If you have found value in our conversation, please hit that like button, subscribe to our podcast, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us grow our community of passionate music educators.